Well, thank you, David, for coming to see us today at Howarth of London as part of your tour with the Yamaha clarinets. We thought we'd take this opportunity to ask you a few questions about your experiences with Yamaha. So when did the Yamaha clarinets that you're playing now first come to your attention?
Well, you probably know I run the Aberystwyth Festival in the summer school and festival, and Lisa Nelson, the flute player, and Simone Rebello were sponsored by Yamaha, and so someone came from Milton Keynes with a demonstration display of instruments, and Natasha said at the end of our chat, when I was thanking her for coming all that way to Aberystwyth with the display, she said, "I suppose you have tried our clarinets?" And I said, "Well, probably not for at least 10 years. So I promised that I would come in to Howarth's, so it's my nearest shop, and spend a fair amount of time in here, and I would try some instruments." And I think you were away on holiday, but your colleague gave me 3 pairs to try of this particular model, the CSG III, with the Hamilton plate, they call it, sort of goldy, coppery substance on the keys. And first blow, I thought, my goodness, what's happened? These are really good. You know, everything worked straight away. It was a nice warm sound over the whole range. There was sort of, however hard you pushed the clarinet, it didn't sort of get any edge on it or nasty sort of brashness. And it played very quietly as well. The tuning seemed much more stable than some other models I'd tried. And so I went out of the shop with a pair on approval, and a little while later bought them, and I've been on them ever since. So that's a year and a half, I suppose, now, nearly.
Wow.
Not even that much, actually, a year and 2 months. But it's, you know, in my great age, to actually open the case every day and be excited by these nice looking instruments in the case, but also sort of the prospect of playing them and not having, I don't know, things like the tuning issues and many of the other problems that I've had over the years that I thought were problems with my playing. And suddenly I find that they work much better on these instruments, and yet I suppose the big difference and why I switched was that in the past there was always something about the tone on the buffet instruments that I played for many years, 35 years I think. I felt that there was a little more character, a bit more soul compared with the Yamahas, which were always well built and very well machined and all this sort of thing, but perhaps a little soulless, or that was my perception years ago. And all that has changed, and now that I've sort of become part of the Yamaha family, and I've been over to Germany and seen how they're made, or certainly how they're prepared in the Atelier Centre in Hamburg, and the sort of expert care that goes into preparing the instruments. And I think the big difference too is that I feel that the Yamaha staff really listen to the players. I feel with Yamaha that everything I or the other friends who were all meeting in Hamburg, when we spoke to the Yamaha people, they were really listened to attentively, and you know, that our opinions were taken seriously.
Fantastic, it's a great story. Can you tell us a little bit about why you went for the Hamilton plate, and if you found differences, and whether you were surprised?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was as simple as it sounded better. It sounds crazy, but you know, I suppose I've been in the business long enough to try things like different ligatures. I remember when the one particular make of ligature was sent to me in 3 different plating finishes, in a silver and a gold and a nickel silver, I suppose, and exactly the same design underneath, and yet they all sounded different, and people wouldn't think that something around the mouthpiece would have that much effect. And obviously because the clarinet is radiating sound, it's not just coming out of the bell or out of the tone holes, it's the whole instrument is resonating. And if you cover the keys in a different material, you can actually change the sound. And indeed, when we were in Hamburg, a few of us were given some new prototypes to try, and the newest form of the Hamilton plate has a slightly different mix. I think it's a little bit more copper and less gold in it, but they sounded even better. And I mean, the three of us were the ones who played in that concert. You know, we were already on this model, and yet we all felt that there was a significant step up with this slightly different mix in the plate. So, but when you try this model in the silver plate and then the Hamilton plate, it really is a lot warmer and sweeter sound, I think, on this one. So it was as simple as that. But I've had to change all my cufflinks now.
Of course. No gold links though. Do you have the lever, the additional lever for the tuning at back?
Yeah, there we are. So that was another thing that the model I played before switching was the Divine, top of the range instrument from Buffet at the time. And I've got quite small hands. I tend to play this bottom E, B key with a very straight finger like that. But because of the little key that's also on the Tosca here, every time I went for that one, I would just catch the edge of this. So I actually had it removed because it was more trouble than it was worth. But I must say, having got this system where you can not only choose to put it on, you know, you get onto a bottom F, for example, and it's just that little bit flat, you can nudge it on gently, whereas in the Buffet system you have to think, I'm finishing a Brahms sonata, I need to play a slightly sharper F and actually reach for it. Here you can, you know, react much more quickly to the circumstances. But I've done a few Mozart quintets, for example. The slow movement of that finishes on a bottom F on the A clarinet, which traditionally is always flat to the cello note, which is doubling you. And it was just a joy the other day in Winchester Cathedral to nudge that on and have it just ring, you know, that last chord just sat there beautifully in tune. So no, I'm very pleased, and it doesn't, the position there doesn't get in the way when you're playing normally. You know, you're not aware of it, but it's right there when you need it.
And you have that both on the B flat and the A.
Yeah, and it also, as well as the F, the other advantage over the Buffet is that it does slightly dock to the E as well. Not as much, but there's a slight rising pitch on the bottom E as well. So again, that can be very useful.
I'm sure people would love to know what sort of setup you're using with these new CSGs.
Yeah, well, for many years I've played, excuse me, a Lomax mouthpiece since the International Clarinet Association bash in Stockholm in 2002. And BG were pushing Lomax mouthpieces at that festival and persuaded me to buy one. I liked it a lot, and then 2 years later in Salt Lake City, I think, I met Mike Lomax and said, oh, I'd like some more of these, please, because all my students have tried this and love it. And basically, he laid out some similar models for me, and they all felt slightly different. And then he measured mine and said, this is a real freak. It's not even straight, and things like this. And I said, well, I don't care, but it works for me and it works for my students. Can I have some more like this? So he said, well, I'll just have to make a David Campbell model. And I always thought I wanted a pudding named after me, but I must say having a mouthpiece named after you is a pretty good second best. Anyway, having said all that, I bumped into my former student Tom Watmo, who's now in the London Philharmonic, and we were talking, catching up in a brief drink after a concert, and because through Boozy and Hawks way back, I brought him into a masterclass that Jack Brymer did on a Boozy and Hawks weekend, and sort of spotted his talent and got him into the Purcell School, and the rest is history. So, you know, he's really made a great success of his career. And anyway, he said, I was so upset. He said I had a David Campbell Lomax mouthpiece and I dropped it and I didn't know what to do, and I've ended up on this Italian one called a Licostini. I'll give you his numbers, but they're worth trying because I think they're possibly even better. Anyway, I'm sorry Mike Lomax, but that's what I'm now playing, a Licostini. He's an independent maker from Tuscany and living near Florence, I think, and I'd never met the guy. I just wrote to him and said, I used to teach Tom Watmo, could I try a mouthpiece please? And he sent me 8 without any money changing hands and on approval, and I kept 2 of them. So yeah, I mean, I still love my Lomax, and there are certain bits of repertoire where I might go back onto it, but for general playing I find this is a really nice sound and very even over the whole range. So yeah.
Okay. And if you had any advice to give to students who are selecting new instruments, what would be your advice?
Well, I think it's important to choose the right make, the right brand from the outset. I mean, in the same way that apparently we stick with the same bank account all the way through our lives, or we're likely to, certainly my generation were. I think if you are brought up on one particular model, the sort of feel of the keys and the layout of the keys and so on, right the way through the range, whether it's Yamaha or whether it's Buffet or whatever, it's good to stay on the same brand all the way through for ease of shifting up a gear. And in view of my new allegiance to Yamaha, I would obviously recommend that people try the Yamahas. I mean, I've always thought that when I've bought instruments in the past for students and so on, the Yamaha one always works straight out of the box. The Buffet, occasionally you get a really fantastic one, you know, the consistency wasn't so good, and quite often it involved maybe up to half an hour of setting up time in the shop. You know, if you bought from a reputable dealers like yourselves in Howarth, then, you know, you could open it up in the shop and play it, but possibly someone backstage had been fiddling with it and making sure it was all working before that happened. The Yamahas are much more skillfully set up in the factory and travel well, and I think that's an important consideration. Also, just blowing through these instruments we have here today, there's an amazing consistency even on the plastic one. It sort of feels like a proper clarinet. There's not a sort of feeling of cheap and cheerful, or you know, that you're, oh, it's only a student model sort of thing. There's a quality that goes all the way through, and that same sort of engineering quality is apparent right through the range. So I would urge people, because I think this is the best one at the top of the heap of any of the makes that I've tried in this shop. So I'd naturally suggest that people start lower down the Yamaha range and work their way up.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for answering our questions, David. We're looking forward to hearing your performance later.
Thank you.
And viewers who couldn't be here today will be able to watch it on our YouTube channel shortly.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.